Greetings from Jerusalem, dear friends. From a very cold and rainy Jerusalem, not as cold as the occupied Syrian Golan Heights. Hello and welcome to Kumi Now. Thank you for joining us for this latest online gathering as we talk about the Syrian Golan. We are glad that you were able to join us this week. I'd like to start by wishing you all a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, wherever you are in the world. My name is Omar Harami, and today I will be the MC, and I will also be giving you an update from the ground, from Palestine and Israel. Before we go further, I'd like to remind you that our webinar is being broadcasted live on Facebook and will be posted on YouTube. If you want to make sure your photo does not accidentally appear online, please turn off your camera. We would also greatly appreciate it if you could quickly share one of the links that are being put in the chat so that others may join. And before we begin, I have one piece of housekeeping to attend to. We have been doing these webinars weekly throughout the entire year. We greatly appreciate your dedication to Kumi Now and Palestine, regardless of whether you've made it to 1, 5, or 50 of these gatherings. We finish out the year next week with one more webinar. Then we will take a break at the beginning of 2022 as we work on how to revise Kumi Now for another year of activism and information. If you have ideas on how Kumi Now can evolve to meet the needs of activists and Palestine alike, please look for an email coming at the end of the month, asking for your input, or reach out to us at kumi@kuminow.com. I'd also like to remind you that Sabil and Reverend Naeem Atiq have just published 6 new booklets. If you missed the webinar about their launch, a link is being shared in chat, and I encourage you to find time to watch it. Now it's time for our weekly activism survey. We will now launch the poll. Please note that there are 3 questions, so scroll down for the third. Thank you to everyone who was able to take action this last week. And thank you to everyone in advance for the action that they are going to take this coming week. The answer to question 2, Israel controls and exploits the Golan Heights for what purpose, is the final answer, all of the above. While the Israeli government speaks only about the security importance of the Golan Heights, the truth is that it exploits the area in a variety of ways, drawing great value from its occupation of the Syrian Golan. And the answer to question number 3, native Syrians in the Golan Heights are granted what nationality, is the second answer, undefined. I'm sure Nizar will talk more about the residency and travel restrictions on the native residents of the Golan Heights. On that note, we hope that you will find this session interesting and informative. I'd like to start by having you meet our speakers for today. Nizar?
Yeah.
Yes, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Let me first thank you all for joining this event, and I'd like first to wish you a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and we hope that the peace eventually will present here in our region and all over the world. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you, my friend Omar, and to thank Sabil sincerely for your efforts to keep the occupied Syrian Golan, which is a forgotten area, or as we call the forgotten occupation, on your mind, and to introduce us everywhere and to put us in the international era always. So I will actually speak few minutes and very shortly about recent developments with regard to settlements and settle expansion in light of the disastrous, if we can say, Trump's administration recognition of the occupied Syrian Golan as part of Israel, contrary to international law, and this recognition, we strongly believe that it endangers international peace and international security, and it will encourage other countries to occupy other lands and to annex these lands, benefiting or taking advantage from Trump's declaration. Actually, after the Trump's declaration, we always have been witnessing a settlement expansion in the occupied Syrian Golan, but it has become more intensive after the Trump's declaration, and Israel since 2010 takes advantage from the ongoing military conflict in Syria proper, and the de facto division of Syria proper to three political entities, at the least, to strengthen its control over the Golan and its remaining indigenous Syrian population. Actually, right now, there is 35 Israeli illegal Jewish settlements in the occupied Golan. According to our statistics, in June 2021, the population of the settlements reached about 29,000 settlers.
Nizar, we will get back to going into the details of after the introduction of Wael and the update. That is okay with you?
Yes. So I will introduce. I will speak very shortly now, and then we can discuss more.
Yes, after Wael introduces himself, and I give an update.
Okay. Sorry for that.
No. I know there's so many things happening, and everybody wants to talk, and unfortunately, very few people around the world know or are talking or paying attention to what is happening in the Syria and Golan. And I appreciate your and taking every opportunity to focus on the Golan. Wael, can you please introduce yourself shortly?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Wael Tarabieh. I am basically an artist, and I joined Al-Marsad 4 years ago. Right now, I'm managing the program of economic, social, and cultural rights in Al-Marsad. And later on, I'll be talking and focusing more on cultural aspects of our lives in the occupied Golan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Wael. We're also looking forward to hear you speak. Very briefly, I know we have excellent speakers today. We will, just to give you an update on what has been happening, As it seems, like the rest of the world, we continue to be moving towards a lockdown because of the Omicron variant. Today, 3 Palestinian children were arrested at Al-Aqsa Mosque. The police or the Israeli army accused them of holding or carrying Palestinian flags with them. The 3 kids brought Palestinian flags to Al-Aqsa Mosque after 2 days of hundreds of Israeli settlers breaking into Al-Aqsa Mosque carrying Israeli flags. They wanted to show a Palestinian flag at Al-Aqsa Mosque, but they were arrested, although they were minors, 3 kids. A guard from the mosque tried to intervene and stop the arrest of the 3 kids. He was also arrested with them. Again, Hisham Abu Hawash, he is approaching 127 days of hunger strike. He has been arrested under administrative detention. That means without trial or even being to know why he was arrested. What are the accusations of the Israeli army? His life, he's at hospital. He has lost most of his weight, and Palestinian prisoners. The only way out of this unjust system is through breaking world records of hunger strikes. So please remember him in your prayers and in your thoughts. Today in Hebron, the Israeli settlers used bulldozers and uprooted over 50 trees close to Hebron. Attacks continue to target Palestinian farmers. They've been on an increase since the beginning of the olive harvest, since October last year, and it is and life is becoming more and more unbearable in the occupied villages of the West Bank. This photo has been taken today from Al-Araqib village. Al-Araqib village was demolished this year alone 14 times. This is the 14th time it gets demolished. Close to 200 times this village has been demolished in its past. This is truly a historical, the writing history, the determination of this village to continue to rebuild their homes, their village every time, 14 times. That means more times than there has been months this year. So please remember them. Please share their resilience and their steadfastness as good news to friends, communities of the amazing work that this village continues to do in the southern part of the country in the Negev area. And now we go to our guests, Nizar from Al-Marsad. We're looking forward to hear you speak and to update us on the situation of our beloved occupied Syrian Golan Heights. Nizar?
Yeah, thank you, Omar. Thank you again. As I said, Israel started extensively expanding the settlements in the occupied Syrian Golan after Trump's declaration, and very closely in April 2019, after the declaration, the Israeli government headed by Netanyahu confirmed a plan to relocate about 250,000 settlers in the Golan and to build about 30,000 settlement units in the biggest settlement, Katsrin, which is located in the middle of the Golan, and to erect another 2 new towns in the Golan. In addition, they declared that Israel is planning to connect the Golan to the Israeli railway or train system, and to create a small airport in the Golan. In October and this year, before about 1.5 months, the Israeli government held its weekly meeting in the Golan in a settlement called Chisfin, one of the Israeli illegal settlements, and the Naftali Bennett, the Prime Minister of Israel, declared during this meeting that now, and in the face of that he declared that exactly about 40 years ago, the government headed by Menachem Begin at that time made a very courageous decision to apply the Israeli law to the Golan Heights by passing a historic law, the law of annexation and the imposition of the Israeli laws over the Golan and its remaining Syrian indigenous community, which living in 5 remaining villages in this occupied areas. Also during this meeting, the government meeting, Bennett declared that the goals of the government of Israel is to double the number of settlers in the occupied Golan and to reach from 2020 to double the population to become by 2030 about 50,000 instead of 28,000. At the meantime, where we're witnessing the expansion of the Israeli settlements and related to it settlements projects, we can feel daily, I mean as Syrians, restrictions on that Israel intensifying the discriminatory policies against us, basically with regard to land use and housing rights. It's very difficult to expand the remaining 5 villages, and that's why most of the population building their houses without permissions. And the reason for that, the Israeli restrictions and discriminatory policies. So meanwhile, they expanding the whole settlements and encouraging illegal settlers to come and to stay in the Golan by affording them lots of privileges. We suffering from the discriminatory policies and as I said, housing rights and to use our lands. So that's the main policies that we are suffering from. There is another one issue that putting pressure or that impedes the expansion of at least 3 Syrian villages in the Golan. It is connected to a wind turbines project being built by a prominent Israeli renewable energy company, and they aim to implement a huge project composed of 26 huge wind turbines in between the 3 villages and inside the agricultural lands, which produce basically apples and cherry. And this project, in case of the implementation of this project, it will seriously affect a traditional culture, agriculture economy of the remaining 3 villages. And of course, it will ban or seriously restrict the expansion of these villages, which means that the housing crisis that we experiencing or facing will be very, very bad and will be worsened. So that's for the moment, and I will be happy after my colleague Wael present to you, answer any, if there's any question. Thank you very much.
Hello again. Maybe first of all, I'd like to introduce our third colleague, Karama Abu Saleh, the lawyer of Al-Marsad, who just joined us. So Karama, it's up to you to introduce yourself, please. Karama, you are muted.
Yes, now it's fine. Hi, everybody. How are you? My name is Karami. I'm working as a lawyer for Al-Marsad organization, the only human rights organization in Golan Heights. My main focus is labor law. What I do for every day, meet with workers from Golan Heights, from the remaining 5 villages in Golan Heights, and give them consultations regarding the labor law. And at some cases, we take some cases to the labor district court in Nazareth. And in addition, I do field visits and advocacy and that kind of work. So I'll be happy to answer your questions and to give additional information about what I am doing recently for Al-Marsad and for the human rights for the human rights case in Golan Heights in general. Thank you.
Okay. Hello again. Actually, I'm not sure how far you are familiar with the Golan Heights. So I thank you very much for your interest in our case, because we feel all the time that we are forgotten and neglected when talking about crisis in Middle East. And also sometimes we feel when we talk about the occupied Syrian Golan that we are using big terminology while talking about a small reality. But maybe the significance of the occupied Golan gives us a kind of justification to do so. So very quickly, I would like to just remind all the friends that when we talk about the occupied Golan Heights, it means we are talking about a few thousands of people. We are talking about total 27,000 Syrians who remained under the Israeli occupation. But most people forget about the hundreds of thousands of Syrians who were uprooted during the war and in the first month of the war. So right now, there are a minimum 500,000 Syrians who are the natives of the Golan who were uprooted from the Golan. And we can say that the Golan Heights was ethnically cleansed by 95% of the population. And this explains why if anyone visits the Golan and starts from Palestine, from Tiberias toward the north, he will see all the time just a few ruins of villages, but there are no villages, no populations of the native Syrians. Only in the far north, you will get in the feet of the Hermon mountain to a few, 4 villages, 5 villages who remain there. And when we talk about 27,000 people only, it means a small neighborhood in Nazareth or any other Palestinian city. So our situation becomes, because we are a very few number of people, more difficult, and our responsibility also becomes more difficult to stay in our lands and to maintain our rights and to express ourselves, and to remind everybody that the Golan Heights is still occupied by Israel. And this year, 2021, is we are remembering that this is 40 years for the law of annexation of the Golan, and many people made a break to think about these 4 decades, what happened with us under the Israeli occupation. And because of we are a small community, the cultural aspects of our lives become very important. I mean, our identity, who are we? And because the law of annexation tries to portray the Golan as a part of Israel, and is encouraging the Syrians to become Israeli citizens. So this question of identity is very crucial for in our life. In this year, our colleague Karami got some new updates, information from statistics about us from the Israeli authorities. And we can say that after 4 decades of occupation, we have 15% of the community who are Israeli citizens, and the remaining 85% are still undefined by the Israeli law. We are not given Syrian passports, but we are permanent residents, and the Israeli side is focusing all the time for all these years on our sectarian identity as a first priority. What I mean by that? I mean that in the Golan, we have 4 villages with vast majority of Druze sect. As you know, Druze are part of the Islam. And for Israelis, it doesn't matter if I identify myself as Syrian, as Arab, as anything. For the Israelis, I am Druze, first of all. And this is a basic element in all the Israeli policies toward the remaining Syrians, is to cut the roots with the Arab Syrian cultural roots, and just to reshape or to engineer a new kind of identity as Druze in order to make a kind of assimilation and to connect the Syrians of the Golan with the Palestinian Druze who live in Galilee and who serve in the Israeli army. So I thought that this introduction was very important in order to put all the information that we will tell you in their context. So regarding the cultural aspect, 6 years after the occupation of the Golan in 1974, the Israelis changed the curriculum in the schools. So the curriculum that was taught by the Syrian government before occupation was put aside, and a new one created by the Israeli Ministry of Education was adopted, not adopted, was imposed in the schools of Golan Heights. What is important in this curriculum is that at the first years they had subjects such as history for Druze, geography for Druze, mathematics for Druze, even mathematics for Druze, and a new subject that was called the Druze heritage. And the Druze heritage, it was a kind of ideological teaching, that to say that you are not Arabs, that you are not Syrians, that first of all you are Druze, and your religious identity is the first priority. And up till now, this subject is being taught in our schools in the Golan Heights. Since we have only Israeli schools, we do not have our own ones because we don't, first of all, have the resources to have independent schools in the occupied Golan. Regarding the cultural aspects, the Golan, because of the activists who thought from the first years of occupation that education is very important to us in order, as a kind of resistance and a kind of maintaining our lives under occupation. So many people worked in order to get scholarships to young people to study in universities. So in the Golan Heights, we may find one of the areas in the whole Middle East with a very high level of educated people and high graduated people from universities. So we had from hundreds and maybe thousands of young people who finished their study in Damascus University. And that's why the cultural question was developed. And throughout the past years, many local activists created some kind of cultural environment. For example, we have many young people who are plastic artists. We have tens of artists who are very active in Palestine, in Ramallah, in Palestinian artistic institutions, and everywhere you can meet a few Syrian artists from the Golan participating with Palestinian artists. Also in music, we have musical bands, and in theater and some writings and etc. So this space of culture was very important in order to recreate or to work on our being here from the cultural point of view about the definition of our identity. But unfortunately, maybe the most tragical event that happened to us and to all the Syrian people was the atrocities and the damage that happened in Syria since 2011. And these events had a very strong impact on the people of the occupied Golan. For the first time, the Golan was split into two parties. One part is supporting the democratic calls for freedom, dignity in Syria, and the other part was supporting the ruling regime. And this rift was strong enough for a distance even to stop the cultural life of the Golan. The hatred and the tension in our public space was very strong. Actually, in recent years, we are calming down, all of us. But what happened at that time, for my opinion, was very critical to the idea that we all the time had in our minds that someday, somehow, a kind of peace agreement must be done with Syria, and the Golan will be given back to Syria, as happened with Egypt and Jordan. But what happened in Syria made this dream seems very as an utopia. And all the people of the Golan now almost sure that this dream is much far away from our reach. And the Israeli side took advantage of these tragical facts. For Israel, there is no Syrian government and there is nobody to make peace with. So by the language of their politicians, we will keep the Golan in our hands forever. And these big facts impacts our lives and made people here think about their lives. And that may explain the rise of the people who recently from 2014 started to apply for Israeli citizenship. So we witnessed a raise of 3% of people who applied to have Israeli citizenship, because maybe some of them lost the hope of being back to Syria, and also to how to meet the everyday life and the challenges of the life of studying and of making livings for the family and so on. So this latest statistics says that the vast majority of the Golan Heights, the Syrians of the Golan Heights, are still convinced and want to stay, despite all the complicated circumstances that we are living within, are Syrians, 85%. And those 15% who have the Israeli citizenship, some of them are families who moved from Galilee to live in the Golan. The other part are the sons and daughters of people who had Israeli citizenship. As you know, they will inherit it in a mechanical way. So we made another statistics to understand how many people have the will to become Israeli citizens. And the numbers that we got to, that those people who applied by their free will to have Israeli citizenship are throughout all the years of the occupation, not only now, are 8.5%. So we are still with a vast majority of Syrians who are trying to cope with all these challenges in life and to find solutions to their lives and to develop their lives and to educate their kids in these situations. From our side, what we could do, we recently, after what I described about the cultural life that stopped because of the events in Syria, recently in July this year, we organized cultural festival. This was a try just to renew the activism in culture. And we were very happy to see that it was successful. We had tens of people who came from Palestine, and many of them, big group from Jerusalem, came and participated in our activities. We had Palestinian and Syrian music, we had exhibitions, we had seminars and activities and art camp for kids. So this is the place that we think we can put our efforts in order to save, to develop, and to maintain our existence as Syrians in the occupied Syrian Golan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Before we move to the questions and answers, we would like to encourage our friends to do some activism. So we'd now like to introduce you to our action of the day and give everyone a few minutes to get started on it before we do the questions and answers. This time also allows our guests to have a short break and get a drink before answering our questions, and allows us to take a break as well. As you can see on the slide, we'd like to bring truth to the tourism industry, letting companies and customers know they are doing business with illegal settlements. We'd like you to contact companies like Airbnb, Booking.com, and others that mispresent the Syrian Golan and urge them to adhere to the truth and international law. Details are on the screen and are being shared in the chat. Our friends from Al-Marsad, do you have any comments or advice on this action? Karama?
Sorry, I didn't hear you, like the last 15, 30.
It seems Karama is having internet problems. So we are asking, I hope you can hear me. Maybe it's better if you turn off your camera. Maybe this will improve the connection. We're asking our friends to contact all of the booking sites that there are many places in the Golan that encourage tourists to visit and use their services. And they publicize the occupied Syrian Golan as part of Israel, which is not, as we know, and contradicts international law. So we're trying, there has been some pressure on Airbnb and Booking.com, but there's other organizations and companies that we need to continue to pressure them. Wael, I saw you nodding your head.
Yeah, I think this is a brilliant idea. This is a brilliant idea. And as you said, Al-Marsad also with the other Palestinian human rights organization work together on this part, on tourism. Also, we have in Al-Marsad what we call alternative tourism. We try, when we meet our friends from abroad, from Europe and the US, just to tell the story of the indigenous people that is marginal up till now. So this is a very good idea.
Yeah, can I, Omar?
Yes, this is
yes, it's a good idea, but we're facing a problem to directly, like Al-Marsad, to directly call for this action, because as you know, there's lots of restrictions on human rights organizations, not only in the occupied West Bank and Gaza, but in Israel itself and the occupied Golan Heights. Why? They put lots of restrictions, and there is the anti-boycott law that declares or state any Israeli organization that deals with BDS campaign or call directly or indirectly to prosecute Israeli officials. Doesn't mind if they military or politicians or policy decision makers, to prosecute them by the ICC or by international courts or by using universal jurisdiction, will be will hold civil responsibility. After the adoption of this law by the government of Israel, all the Israeli human rights organizations and organizations registered under Israeli law due to the annexation, I mean in East Jerusalem and the occupied Golan, they stop dealing directly with this issue. But eventually this is absolutely a good idea, and I think if it comes from your side, that would be great.
The action for today, it is as Sabil, we are for all nonviolent resistance and using definitely economic sanctions and measures. But the action for today is only writing to Airbnb and Booking.com.
Yeah.
This village or this hotel is located inside Israel. We want them to be accurate by international law and to say that it is part of the occupied Golan Heights. So it is only improving the customer's service and to make them more transparent in the information that they are providing it.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are different measures, and definitely raising awareness and speaking truth to power is one of them. So I hope all of our friends will share this action and you will act on it. But there's plenty of questions. There's tons of questions that we have received, and I hope we'll be able to answer most of them. So if you allow us, we will move to the questions and answers section. Are you ready, Nizar, Wael, and Karama?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So the first question, and among you, you can decide whoever would like to answer this question. An enormous reservoir of either of natural gas has been discovered in the Golan Heights around 10 years ago. That was immediately after the discovery. Netanyahu declared, "We will never give up the Golan Heights." Is this about the theft of natural resources, in your opinion, the continuation of occupation of the Golan Heights?
Yes, yeah, I think it's true. And they were looking before 2 or 3 years, they were digging in 11 areas in the southern Golan, and seemingly they found gas, but suddenly they stopped the project. We don't know why, and we did a research paper on this, which you can find on our in our homepage. We think that they postponed this project maybe for economic reasons, not for political reasons, of course, but I think mainly for environmental reasons, because some Israeli environmental organizations are against the exploitation of oil and gas in the Golan, not because they don't recognize Israel's occupation, rather than it's for ecological and environmental reasons. So, but we don't know what's beyond this, the reason they stopped the digging.
The second question, how easy is it for Al-Marsad to operate in the Golan Heights? Most of the attention of the international community goes to the West Bank and Gaza, or Palestinians inside Israel. There's very little attention given to the occupied Syrian Golan Heights. Do you feel isolated and alone?
Yes, we used to feel, and we still feeling. It's that's why or we saying that the Golan is a forgotten area which is under occupation. And I still remember when we start our work in 2004, we faced lots of problems, because we really discovered and realized that the Golan is totally known. And we established the organization after 2 or 3 years of discussions and workshops with Palestinians, human rights organizations in Ramallah and East Jerusalem. And they advised us to create a human rights organization, because to advocate the international community about the human rights situation in the Golan. But we used to feel, and we still feeling, that the Golan is not practically, it's not in the agenda of the EU, the international community, even the donors. It's not on their agenda. We don't know for the reasons beyond that. And that's why we're still experiencing a problem with the approaching or reaching various donors who support human rights organization everywhere, and especially in Palestine and Israel. Sometimes when we discuss this issue, we feel that it's for political reasons. I don't mean the formal decision of the international community, which stating or stressing every year that the Golan is part of Syria and is occupied territory, but de facto, we feel that we are not given are not treated like others.
Thank you. This is a question for you, Nizar, again. Since the US is the only country in the world to recognize Israel's illegal annexation of the Golan, are you aware of organizations in the US working to reverse that decision? What can citizens of other countries that don't recognize Israel's control do to support Syrians in the occupied Golan Heights?
Yes, we know, and recently, I mean, before 2 years, we had for the first time a lecture tour. Our colleague from the US, who was our Al-Marsad advocacy officer, he conducting a lecture tour in the US, New York and Washington, and he had a chance to meet with some legislators from the Democratic Party and some human rights organization and constitutional rights organization in the US, and they discussed the human rights situation in the Golan, and they agreed at that time to give the Golan more focus. But as you know, and we were intending to travel to the US to expand our advocacy work, but the situation in the world and the COVID-19 now, everything was stopped. We hope to revive our initial steps that in the US very soon. Regarding the second part, I think that the Americans, citizens and European citizens can advocate the situation of the human rights in the Golan, and I guess that some of you had a chance to visit the Golan, and you can realize the impacts of the discriminatory policies that we facing here in the Golan.
So, how easy is it for people, for Syrians living in the Golan Heights, if they want to apply for Israeli citizenship? Is it easy to get it, or it's difficult?
I leave this for Wael. Wael works on this issue.
Yes, actually, it's easy. Since the Israeli side thinks that in case that the majority of the remaining Syrians apply to the Israeli citizenship, it may be understood that the community have the wish to stay under the Israeli occupation, and this will help Israel in portraying the situation as if this is the free will of people. They do not want to be back under the Syrian sovereignty. So for people, it's easy to apply for an application, and they will have the Israeli citizenship.
And maybe this question is also related. Well, you can answer it. Why are the Druze, Palestinian Druze, able to serve in the Israeli army or willing to serve in the Israeli army?
Let's say that this is not very accurate from a historical point of view. In Palestine, the Druze and the Cherkessa in particular, if we read the history of the modern history, we'll find that they were the victims, I think, of the Zionist movement work. And this image of them is a creation of the Zionist point of view, or the way that they want people to see things. I think they are Palestinians for everything as others, but in the first years of the creation of the Israeli state, even before, the Zionist movement worked very hard among the minorities, and they tried to make them as allies to the Zionist movement. And the Druze people, the leaders of the Druze minority in the Galilee, signed with the Israeli state a kind of agreement that they will serve in the Israeli army. It was, I think, in 1956, something like that. And since that time, the Druze serve in the army. It does not mean that it was a wish of a part of the Palestinian people to serve in the Israeli army while the others are not serving. Because nowadays, if we look to numbers, we'll find that other Palestinians who are not Druze, who are serving in the army and don't have obligatory law that force them to serve, are more than the Druze who are serving by obligatory law. So on the other hand, there are new movements among young Druze people, young Palestinian Druze people within Israel to refuse serving in army. And in case any young man who refuses to go to army, he will be sued and he will be put in jail. But with the time, year after year, we find more and more young Druze people who are aware that they are part of the Palestinian people and who refuse to serve in the Israeli army. We cannot talk about big percents of people, but this process within the Palestinian Druze community had started and is developing with the time.
Okay,
I think, Amar, this is a kind of policy divide and rule. And it was very, the Israeli authorities and the Zionist movement, adopted and practiced this policy. And they, it worked very well, and but regarding the Israeli army statistics, according to the statistics, about 25% from the Druze youth, they refuse to serve in the Israeli army. But what is interesting, a study which was published last year about the Druze in the Palestinian Druze showed that the Druze sect, the most sect of the Palestinians who suffered from a land appropriation in Israel. They lost about 70% of their historic lands. Meanwhile, the other sects lost 60%. 10% less. But anyway, the serving in the army didn't make any change to the Druze. It worsened their situation. If you compare the Druze situation to others sects in Palestinian sects in Israel, you will see that they are intellectuals, they study in the universities, even in Israel, either abroad. They have their dentists, their medics, and their advocates. Meanwhile, the Druze, they don't have, because they are serving in the army. So that's, I mean that their situation, I believe that is very, very bad comparing to other sects.
I have a request, because we have like another 15 questions and we will not be able to answer them for sure. What I suggest is that we send you the questions, and if you are able, I know you are very busy, if you are able to answer some of these questions, we'd appreciate it. We send the recording to the rest of our friends, and and hopefully we can send the questions and answers if your time permits it. Our good friends from Al-Marsad. So thank you for joining us today, and thank you Nizar and Wael, Karama, for dedicating your time and sharing with us. A link to a video of this gathering, along with all the links of shared today, will be available on the Kumi Now website and on YouTube in a day or so, and it will be shared in the next newsletter. You can subscribe to Kumi Now on YouTube and subscribe to our newsletter to make sure you receive them. We would greatly appreciate if you shared the informative session with your friends and colleagues, as well as information on our future sessions. Next week, we will focus on Christians in the Holy Land with our guest, Bishop Munib Yunan. If you'd like to be reminded of the online gathering an hour before they begin, you can register for email reminders at kuminow.com/online using the form at the bottom of the page. We hope to see you back here in a week's time. Thank you again and good night, and wishing you also a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you very much to our friends in Al-Marsad. I know the policy is to divide and conquer, but we are one family, one people, and same struggle. Thank you very much and see you next week.
Thank you, Omar. Thank you, everybody.